because we've seen the invisible hand. I know I have personally in so many areas that have negatively impacted our business in huge ways, and have many scores of other people in our space. And this is the gaslighting of America.
And when they do this, we can't do that. We can't spread the good word of America, basically.
Elite global leaders, I guess is the best way to put it, they have an agenda of how they like things going, and if they see things going in a direction that they don't agree with or don't like, they've come up with a mechanism to try to suppress the reach of those ideas.
Hello, and welcome to the Pop Culture Contrarian Podcast with Thomas, Sterling, and Andrew.
Hello.
Hey there.
Our topic today it's a little bit more political than usual, but it's GARM, which doesn't mean much. It's just a weird sound that I made just then.
At least yet.
But
maybe everybody knows after this episode.
Yeah, hopefully by the end of the episode, you'll understand and understand why we wanted to talk about it. GARM is an acronym. It stands for the Global Alliance on Responsible Media. Who could possibly be against that?
It sounds so responsible.
It sounds so responsible. Well, Andrew, you brought this topic to our attention.
Indeed.
Based on some testimony I think Ben Shapiro was making yesterday.
Right.
Do you want to, I think this has affected you more directly than Thomas or I, so do you want to kind of explain this to us?
Sure, yeah. So yesterday, which was July 10th, today's July 11th, this will come out a week after our recording, Ben Shapiro testified before the Judiciary Committee, or the House Judiciary, I can never speak that.
House Judiciary Committee.
Yeah, say it for me, Thomas, please. And he was describing the ways that Daily Wire has been negatively impacted by these massive corporate global structures, namely GARM and the WFA, which is the World Federation of Advertisers. And the World Federation of Advertisers is a subset of the World Economic Forum. And we know a little bit about that, the whole New World Order kind of stuff. And essentially, this is a conglomerate of, or a grouping of corporations who've come together to say, they try and discern who is or isn't a dangerous information, like misinformation spreading organization. So if there are outlets where advertisers might put their products or their ads to make money, if, for example, they're advertising on Alex Jones. If you're part of this group, you're not allowed
to advertise on Alex Jones because he says they're putting chemicals in the water that make the frogs gay.
Right.
Or whatever it is.
Now, that's an extreme example, but that can be applied to very reasonable outlets who have good ideas. But
and from what we've been hearing, it has applied. What are the outlets it's applied to?
Well, it has applied to Daily Wire.
Daily Wire.
There was an attempt, and this is in the committee's documentation, an attempt to apply this to Twitter when Musk took over, Well,
I think it actually was successful. So I don't know if y'all remember this, but I remember shortly after Elon bought Twitter, what we saw was pretty much everyone stopped advertising on Twitter.
Yeah.
McDonald's, Facebook, everybody stopped advertising on Twitter. And now it seems like that was the responsibility of GARM. That's who organized that.
Yeah, they strong arm their members.
Yeah.
Do you remember that regarding that incident? I recall Musk, because it kind of went viral. He was being interviewed about the lack of advertising or advertisers pulling from the platform. And he famously just said they can go F themselves, I think is what he said. Not that's so politely.
That's what was happening here.
Right. But he was being challenged. And I think the idea, as we look at it now, full circle with now that we realize or have this whole group GARM has come to light, this cabal, it is interesting because the interviewer was kind of pressing him to say, well, are you going to change some things? Are you going to allow this hate speech on your platform? Those are some of the charges. There was anti-Semitic hate or something that was ironically now, given what's happening today. But that was one of the charges being leveled against the platform that was allowing all this stuff. And the interviewer was pressing, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? And that's when he gave that famous answer, basically saying, I'm not going to bow to some external groups telling me how I have to run my platform, which is exactly what the attempt was. I think now we see kind of full circle. That's exactly what they were trying to do.
Well, this is a a look finally at the mechanism of what we have known for many years, especially, and this is where Sterling you're getting at, this is disproportionately impacted my job. I run marketing for the Patriot Post, and I joined in 2019. And guess what year GARM was created?
What year was GARM created?
2019.
Oh, man. They knew you were coming, Andrew.
They knew it. They were scared of me. But I've watched this personally impact our business. Now, at the Patriot Post, we don't take advertising. So it hasn't directly impacted us. But it has in the mechanisms that GARM has used to identify the quote-unquote bad actors, and that is through leftist fact-checking organizations.
Right.
So this raises a question in my mind because of that, because we don't take advertising. Though we are on platforms that do take advertising.
Yeah.
And we have experienced heavy censorship or shadow banning, maybe is a better term.
Correct. Yeah.
On
starting about mid-2020.
Facebook, for example. Now, Facebook, obviously, if they're being influenced by this cabal, is going to want to avoid the negative, I guess, assertion that they're running stuff from bad sources. And so therefore it's going to try to suppress those sources on its site that it doesn't get blacklisted potentially by this group. Is that kind of how it works against us?
That's right. And when we're suppressed, because we rely on people coming and subscribing to the newsletter. By the way, also speaking of subscribing, make sure to subscribe to the Pop Culture Contrarian.
Yes.
And hit the bell notification if you're on YouTube. Subscribe on Spotify. Leave us reviews and stars and ratings, and it helps us go a long way. Share it with your friends.
Yep.
But back to our parent organization, the Patriot Post. It's a newsletter organization, and our primary means of disseminating our thoughts on liberty, our newsletter, is through email.
Yeah.
To have subscribers hearing through email about what we're up to. And then we ask them, hey, if you like what we're doing, you can donate to our cause. And so that's how we sustain the organization.
And so when they just kind of do all this stuff with GARM to say you can't advertise here, you can't advertise here, it just kind of lowers the whole traffic in general.
It destroys our traffic. I mean, it destroyed our traffic by like 90% over the course of
90%.
a couple of years.
I thought I heard the number 98% the other day.
At one point, I think it could be described as that.
Yeah. So and then that was on Facebook, I think. So
that
it'd be
was
like
Facebook,
something that would have gotten 100,000 views only got 2,000 views. That's 98%.
That's probably a good example. Yeah. And so that will directly impact our ability to get subscribers.
Yeah.
Which impacts our ability to get revenue. And so it's not the exact same mechanism of saying, hey, advertisers are going to pull, but it is the same impact and the same motive. Yeah. I think creating this huge system of destroying conservative thought.
Yeah. And that's the real issue. You said it's going to impact our ability to get more readers, and that's going to impact our ability to get more revenue. But the point, I mean, we like to get money,
Sure.
Sue us, just like everybody else on the planet. We like to get money. But the big thing is we want to spread our ideas of liberty. And we want to educate Americans on what's going on, and we want to educate Americans on what America is and what the ideas that build America and make America better are. And when they do this, we can't do that. We can't spread the good word of America, basically. And that's what we do here.
Yeah, this is speech suppression. I mean, it's a direct assault against our most fundamental right as Americans, which is we get to speak our minds. And these platforms were initially conceived, Facebook, as places where people could go communicate with friends and put on their feed whatever the thinking was.
Yeah.
And as it's evolved and changed and grown into what it has become today, that speech has become more and more broadly spread until a lot of the speech didn't comply with what this cabal of elite global leaders, I guess is the best way to put it, they have an agenda of how they like things going. And if they see things going in a direction that they don't agree with or don't like, they've come up with a mechanism to try to suppress the reach of those ideas.
And this is, I know you have one thought, Sterling,
Go ahead.
but I think it's important to frame this. This has all come because of technology and the internet. And in no other time during all of human history have the masses had a platform and a bullhorn as they have to this day. And so this is a response to the gatekeepers were dethroned.
Yeah.
And so it's now we are in the Wild West of the First Amendment and freedom of speech and human rights, and trying to figure out, what does it look like with this new technology? And of course, the WEF has their idea, and they just want to be the gatekeeper.
And so we keep mentioning the WEF, and I just want to expand on that real quick. That's the World Economic Forum, led by Klaus Schwab, I think is his name. And they are basically, it's a whole bunch of billionaires.
Yeah.
And, Bill Gates loves this group, and so do a bunch of other people. And they meet up in Davos, Switzerland, and they basically scheme how they're going to run the world for the next year.
It's so like evil villain movie, like Bond
it truly seems like, the climax of a Bond movie, their meetings in Davos, Switzerland. But the WEF, is, they're the group who published that video in like 2018 or something. Here's what the world's going to be like by 2030. You will own nothing and you'll be happy about it. That's the WEF.
Yeah.
They also helped push the ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance policies for investing. And I think probably most of our listeners know a little bit about ESG by now. This is the next thing. They had ESG. It's kind of been unmasked. It's kind of become unpopular. Now they're doing GARM, or they have been doing GARM for a few years. And now, as it's starting to become unmasked, they're probably scheming up the next thing.
The way I look at it actually is these are all things that work in concert for their one goal.
Yes.
And so the ESG agenda was to get businesses to invest money in certain directions.
Yeah.
Not
in like renewable energy companies and not in oil companies, stuff like that.
Yeah. This is to get advertisers to advertise only, and companies to advertise only on those platforms that have been greenlit by the WEF effectively as suitable, upstanding platforms that have the right message or viewpoint.
Yeah.
And so that they can effectively blacklist those other media organizations with which I disagree with.
It's McCarthyism.
Yeah.
It's exactly what it is.
Well, and it is very much against an American point of view. Like when they say they're the Global Alliance on Responsible media means places that don't like America. If your media reporting is anti-America, you're probably responsible under them. And I want to read this quote from one of the co-founders of this group, GARM. I'll start at the beginning of this paragraph. This is from the judiciaryhouse.gov website report on the hearing they had yesterday.
Do you want to give the guy's name first, or?
Well, I'll get to it.
Okay.
So I'm starting at the beginning of this paragraph before his quote. For an organization reliant on speech and persuasion in advertising, GARM appears to have anti-democratic views of fundamental American freedoms. In discussing his views on freedom of speech, GARM's leader and co-founder, Rob Rakowitz, has expressed frustration with an extreme global interpretation of the U.S. Constitution and complained about using principles for governance and applying them as literal law from 230 years ago made by white men exclusively. And so that's kind of coming right out and saying it. What we're against is free speech.
Yeah.
And that's something you're hearing more and more often. You're hearing it from university presidents and stuff like that. And you're hearing it in many places that free speech has become an issue for basically leftists. It gets in the way of what they're trying to do. And so they are no longer fans of free speech. It used to be the ACLU, which was very leftist, was very much pro-free speech. Those days are gone. The idea of you and me and whoever's listening and anyone being able to say what's on their mind freely and have their voice heard, that's a no-no. You can't have that. And so that's what they're trying to accomplish through these things like GARM and ESG and other things.
I find it interesting that he actually identifies the principle as the problem.
Principles for governance and applying them as literal law. Yeah.
Yeah. Freedom of speech is freedom to think.
Yep.
And what they're basically wanting to do by this is they have a value system. They clearly have a value system. Yep. We can call it woke. We can call it, New World Order, whatever terms.
Yeah, I would say WEF's value system is us in charge, and whatever leads to that is good, and whatever leads against it is bad.
It's the doctrine of power.
Right. But they are opposed to the value system much of the value system that currently dominates the West and especially the United States and what it was founded upon.
Yeah.
These values that liberate the individual. That's not what they're after. They don't want that.
Mm-hmm.
They want a system by which they're still in control and they get to kind of move populations, move the markets, however they want to do it. They want to be the ones that are making those decisions. The rest of us have to be, their agenda is to figure out how do we can control these big populations. Yep. They don't look at people as individuals. They look at them as populations, identity groups. Hence the identity politics that's often played, right?
Well, it's divide and conquer.
Yeah.
And it's Marxist.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is. So this whole thing about GARM has kind of just broken, as we were saying yesterday. So we're starting to see some responses from it. I'm going to pull up this tweet from Elon Musk. But first, let's go to context a little bit. In the Supreme Court recently, there's been a few cases about conservative speech suppression on social media. And the Supreme Court cases have kind of said, oh, you don't really have a great case here, take it to a lower court, figure it out, and then come back to us. That's kind of been how the Supreme Court's landed.
Yeah, the U.S. is in a state where we're wrestling with a newer thing, you could say, is how does our First Amendment apply in this new realm of the internet, and specifically how the internet has evolved and what's becoming.
Yeah, there's a conflict between my free speech, saying something on my Facebook page, and Facebook's corporation free speech in suppressing what I said on my page on Facebook.
Right. I think there's a good
versus the platform.
Right. It's the Section 230.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a good answer that's already been developed, and that was with the whole utility laws. Utility companies, like for example, the phone companies.
So Bell South
or something. They had no right to say you're not allowed to have a phone because we don't like, or you're not allowed to have a phone line because you say things to your friends or something on the phone line that we disagree with. No, they didn't have the freedom to do that. Effectively, what Facebook or big tech, these social media companies have done is they have tried to say, no, we do because, and then they use examples of we don't promote hate speech or we don't, or other other
part of why this is kind of difficult legal waters is because there are things that you want Facebook to be able to take down. You know, if someone uploads porn, you want Facebook to be able to do something about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's laws already.
There are laws.
That's the problem. It's kind of like the whole thing with the border and the claim that, well, we need more laws to be able to enforce the border. No, the laws exist. We just have to be willing to actually enforce them.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I think what's happening is the Supreme Court is trying to figure this out on these different terms, and each specific case actually has a slightly different angle that's being brought. The two that I recall most recently, one had to do with the government's influencing or seeking to impact big tech companies in suppressing speech on their platform, which I think is the most direct assault on the First Amendment, because it's the government directly trying to say, hey, we don't want this.
And they basically got the ruling to go their way, basically.
No, they basically kicked the can back to, they said that the states didn't have standing.
Yeah. Standing is a concept of you have to be the wronged party to be able to bring a lawsuit.
Right.
Okay.
The other one had to do with laws that have been passed in a couple states that are attempting to prevent big tech companies from regulating speech on their platforms based on viewpoint discrimination. Those were basically, the court kind of kicked those back to the lower courts to figure out. So that's kind of still not decided.
Yeah. So that's kind of how these cases have gone, is basically Supreme Court kicking the can down the road on these. Yeah. But what has just happened with this GARM stuff, 6 hours ago, Elon Musk tweeted this. I'm going to read it. Having seen the evidence unearthed today by Congress, and some of that evidence we haven't gone into yet, but they specifically mentioned they told advertisers not to advertise on Joe Rogan, not to advertise on X, and not to advertise on Daily Wire. I guess we did mention that. Anyhow, having seen the evidence unearthed today by Congress, Elon says, X has no choice but to file suit against the perpetrators and collaborators in the advertising boycott racket. Hopefully some states will consider criminal prosecution. So in the question of standing, Elon is the aggrieved party.
Is.
It was
So
directly directed at X because Elon bought it. So you can't really argue anyone has better standing than him on this issue.
Yeah. Didn't Shapiro also say in his testimony that the Daily Wire is in the midst of a lawsuit somehow in connection to this?
I think I have the text of his lawsuit. Let's see.
I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah.
I really like the word that Musk uses, and that is racket. And I think maybe another good word to be used would be antitrust.
Yes. Yeah.
And, this is illegal stuff at the end of the day. And
it's illegal in the U.S. It's a kind of global organization. So I guess there's different laws in different countries. But here, what they're doing is illegal.
Yeah.
It should be quite clearly illegal. And I think that we'll see how these lawsuits play out, because I think that's important. That it's almost
so
like,
while you're mentioning the lawsuits, I want to read this real quick.
Okay.
So Ben Shapiro, in his testimony, he said a lot of stuff, but what he said was, it's time to stand up for the First Amendment in Congress. Congress can do so in two ways. First, Congress must investigate the informal and perhaps formal arrangements between censorship cartels like GARM and executive branch agencies, that'd be the presidency. The Daily Wire has already filed a federal lawsuit against the State Department for allegedly doing just this. So that's where he mentioned that.
Okay. So that first case where I said they didn't have standing, the Supreme Court said you don't have standing. This is an example now. It's almost like Daily Wire said, okay, we actually do have standing.
Right.
And so they're stepping up to sue on that.
So as he's referencing, the State Department basically came and said you can't, probably the Hunter laptop stuff. I don't know for a fact, but do you think that maybe is what he's referencing there?
I'm not.
Because they told, the State Department told Facebook, or at least it was the FBI, they told Facebook, hey, you can't run this stuff. And a lot of other places said, hey, you can't run this stuff.
Yeah, well, they've said different things on that. Zuckerberg has said different things about what he was told. One story is we were told a week before by the FBI that there was going to be some Russian disinformation coming soon.
Yeah.
And so when the laptop story dropped and the 30 former spies lied and said it was Russian disinformation, Facebook was like, okay, this is what we were warned about. We can't run this. And that's one of his stories. I think he's told some other stories. Not saying anything about Zuckerberg telling the truth, but maybe he's not telling the truth.
One thing I'm curious about now that this is kind of this group has been unmasked, I would be really curious to see other instances where sponsors pulled their sponsorship from different groups or different, I guess, companies. If there's a connection or a thread tying him to GARM, like did the message come out from GARM? Okay, this group, we're going to threaten them first, and if they don't bow, then we're going to go ahead and pull it.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, we've kind of seen the reverse of this, and maybe the reason why this is starting to be exposed with the whole Bud Light thing that blew up.
Yeah.
Where consumers are like so hot about this and saying, we do not agree with these values, we reject it. And so companies suddenly now are like, it's not safe probably to go either way.
Yeah.
And so, the most recent is Tractor Supply. They got exposed. And
So fill me in a little bit on this. All I heard was the end of it ended in a positive way from our point of view.
Yeah, they had DEI corporate structure in place, like a program.
Right, and they were spending money supporting the Rainbow Mafia stuff.
They said
they had pride sections in their adverts and stuff talking about.
I don't know if they did that.
Well, I think.
Yeah, they might have had that in certain places, but I think more problematic was they were actually giving money to these organizations.
Okay.
So,
the customer said, we don't want you to do that.
There was a boycott or something?
Yeah.
There's a threatened boycott, and they backpedaled fast.
And basically fired all their DEI people, from what I can tell.
Yeah, they said they were ending their DEI group.
Yeah, and said, we're not going to do any pride stuff. We're just
it wasn't just DEI, it was ESG, because they also said, we're not going to do this whole invest in climate stuff anymore.
So when the word is spread and the people know what's going on, we can do something about this stuff. We actually do, in some ways, have more power even than these elites in Davos, Switzerland, in some ways.
And what's even more satisfying is seeing this stuff revealed.
Yeah.
And because, what's done in the dark will be brought to the light.
Yeah.
And, be forewarned, all of those who are responsible for this stuff, it will not go uncovered.
Yeah.
I think a really prime example of this too is the failing trust in the legacy media.
Yeah, and that's
seeing.
what Shapiro talks about in his testimony.
And he does, and he uses the example of President Joe Biden and his ailing health.
Yeah. And
this long-standing, and of course, these media companies, they're part of this organization too, and they've got the green checks. They're all okay because they happen to toe the line.
So just real quick, because we haven't actually talked about this yet, I want to just read some of the groups that are part of GARM.
Okay.
So you've got, just looking at this kind of constellation they have here, Facebook, Snapchat, YouTube, TikTok, Twitch, Pinterest, some things I don't know, Dentsu, IPG, whatever that is, McDonald's, Adidas, Dell, BP,
Disney.
Lego, MasterCard, Disney. So this is, when they say this is collusion and possible, I guess, monopoly, they're not lying. This is pretty much everybody.
Yeah, it's an antitrust situation.
It is. Yeah. It really is. And to that point, there are historic laws on the books that we can look to break up this monopoly, basically.
Yep. Yeah, there is precedent.
Yeah,
right. We've done it before.
We've done it before. We can do it again. These things need to be busted up.
Yeah.
And it's even bigger, though, I think, than maybe we even realized. Because we talk about the trust busting of social media or of big tech. But look how big this is.
Yeah.
Right. And the interesting thing is we saw the coordinated actions of this group and didn't recognize it at the time when they pulled out of X.
Yep.
Like I saw all these companies pulling out. I didn't realize they were actually colluding together.
Well, that's my point, is now we can look back like you just did now and say, wait a second, when that happened, because they paint it off as, oh, this position this company has taken, or this statement this CEO has said is so beyond the pale that everybody's saying, no, 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 no. The reality is, no, they were given marching orders and they pulled out.
Meanwhile, they've been gaslighting all of us.
Yep.
Yeah. And
telling
that's
us
exactly
that we're
right.
crazy.
Yeah. It seemed like, Twitter took such an extreme position that the moral outrage from all these companies was we must stand aside. But no, they were actually colluding about it.
Yeah.
Spotify stood up, though.
Did they?
They leaned on Spotify to pull Joe Rogan during the COVID-19 stuff. And they said, no, Joe is our number one cash cow and screw you guys.
Yeah. It turns out sometimes companies still choose money over other things. It happens occasionally. All right. Well, so this is just kind of something we didn't know about until yesterday. It's something not many people knew about.
We've known about it all along.
Well, we didn't know the name.
Now the mechanism has been revealed, and it is satisfying to see it because we've seen the invisible hand. I know I have personally in so many areas that have negatively impacted our business in huge ways and have many scores of other people in our space. And this is the gaslighting of America. Yeah.
That's a very good way to put it, Andrew. So yeah, we kind of walked you through what GARM is, the Global Alliance on Responsible Media, if you forgot. They targeted Twitter, X, they targeted Joe Rogan, Daily Wire, a bunch of other groups, but those are, the three big names. They're being sued. They are run by the WEF, which is the World Economic Forum, which is, I don't actually think it's too much of a hyperbole to say these are Bond villains.
Basically.
They're blatantly anti-free speech. They're anti-American. They're anti the U.S. Constitution. They don't want you to be able to say what you believe or, as Thomas said, have the right to think. And they're starting to get exposed. And hopefully this just picks up momentum and more of their webs unravel. That's what we're hoping over here. Anything I missed, guys?
There's a reason why the legacy media is no longer trusted.
That is very true. It's just not. All right. This has been the Pop Culture Contrarian Podcast with Thomas, Sterling, and Andrew. We're brought to you by the Patriot Post. It's right and it's free. Be sure to like and subscribe. Bye.
Bye.
See you guys.